The morning was cold and silent, but something in the air felt different, like a quiet cry was hidden beneath the stillness. As I walked along the deserted alley, the world around me seemed frozen, untouched by life. But then, faintly, I heard it soft, broken meow, barely audible, as if the sound itself was struggling to survive. My heart tightened. The sound wasn't coming from the open street, but somewhere deep within the shadows. Step by step I followed it, my breath hanging. In the cold air, blending with the distant cries, that's when I saw her. A frail figure curled beneath an old rusted dumpster, her body shivering under the thin layer of dirt and rain-soaked fur. Her emerald eyes met mine, not with fear, but with a desperate, silent plea. She wasn't crying for herself. She was begging for the tiny, fragile lives hidden beneath her broken body. In that moment, I understood she was holding on, not for herself, but for her kittens. And with what little strength she had left, she was begging me to save them. The alley was narrow, almost suffocating, with towering brick walls on either side, their surfaces stained by years of rain and neglect. Puddles reflected the pale gray sky, broken only by scattered trash and forgotten debris. The air smelled of dampness and rust, heavy with an unsettling silence that seemed to swallow every sound, except for that fragile meow that had led me here. As I stepped closer, the weak cries grew clearer, cutting through the emptiness like tiny echoes of desperation. The further I moved into the darkness, the more my eyes adjusted, revealing the hidden corner where life clung to hope. There, beneath the dented dumpster, lay the cat, a short-haired tabby, her once vibrant orange and white fur, now matted and dulled by grime. Her ribs pressed sharply against her skin with every shallow breath she took, her frail chest rising and falling as though each breath might be her last. Tiny drops of rain landed on her fragile frame, and yet she didn't move to shelter herself. Her gaze locked onto mine again, exhausted, trusting, pleading, but it wasn't until I knelt down that I noticed the faint movement beneath her. Small, trembling bundles shifted under her broken body, newborn kittens. Their tiny bodies barely covered by their mother's weakened warmth. Their fur was still damp from birth, their eyes sealed shut, each breath a struggle against the cold. The mother had wrapped herself protectively around them, shielding them from the harsh world she could no longer fight against alone. A soft gust of wind brushed past us, and for a brief moment, her thin tail twitched as if she was trying to pull her babies closer. Despite her own suffering, every fiber of her being was focused on keeping them alive. She had nothing left, but even in the face of death, her instincts refused to surrender. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just a rescue, this was a race against time. The fight for their survival had already begun long before I arrived, and now, they were depending on me to carry it forward. Carefully, I lowered myself closer to her, making sure my movements were slow, gentle. I didn't want to startle her or trigger her final ounce of energy to run. She watched every motion, her eyes flickering between fear and desperate hope. The rain continued to fall in a steady rhythm, each droplet landing on her fragile body like tiny needles. As I extended my hand, I could feel the cold radiating from her thin frame. Her breathing was faint, almost invisible, as if her life was balancing on a fragile thread. Yet when my fingers gently brushed her damp fur, she didn't pull away. Instead, her eyes closed for a brief moment, a quiet surrender, not of defeat, but of trust. Underneath her, the kittens wriggled slightly, their small bodies shifting against the cold metal beneath them. Their tiny paws twitched as they searched blindly for warmth, for safety. They were no more than a few days old, pink noses, ears folded, skin so thin you could almost see the veins beneath their fur. I whispered softly to her, trying to comfort her, even though I knew she barely had the strength to hear me. Her breathing grew more labored, her chest rising slower, her head drooping as exhaustion threatened to pull her under. But every time her head began to fall, she forced it back up, not for herself, but for them. She was still fighting. See where her paws had been scraped raw from trying to find shelter? The small cuts on her legs told the story of her journey, one of wandering, searching, and sacrificing, all while carrying the weight of her unborn kittens inside her fragile body. The alley around us felt heavier now, as if even the walls bore witness to her silent struggle, the quiet broken only by the soft mews of the kittens and the faint wheeze of their mother's breath. I realized then, if I hesitated any longer, it might be too late. The mother cat had given everything she had left to keep them alive. And now, she was asking for one final mercy, to finish what she no longer could. The weight of the moment pressed against my chest. Every second felt like a countdown, as if the alley itself was holding its breath alongside me. I gently unzipped my jacket, creating a makeshift cradle with the inner lining, knowing that any sudden movement could frighten her or harm the fragile kittens. Slowly, I slid one arm beneath her weakened body, the other carefully gathering the tiny kittens who instinctively huddled together, mewing softly. The mother let out a quiet, strained purr, not of comfort, but of final permission. She no longer had the strength to resist or protect. She was entrusting me fully now. As I lifted them, I could feel their cold little bodies pressing against my chest, seeking warmth. The kittens' tiny hearts beat rapidly, their small mouths opening and closing, searching for their mother's comfort. My jacket barely shielded them from the icy wind that crept through every crack in the alley. That the mother's head rested limply against my arm. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, her gaze meeting mine one last time, soft, tired, but grateful. A faint whisper of breath escaped her lips, as though she was saying, "Thank you." But then, a sudden noise jolted the stillness. From the far end of the alley, a stray dog appeared, its eyes locked on us. It was thin, hungry, and cautious, but the desperation in its eyes mirrored the danger. My pulse quickened. I stepped backward, my body shielding the small family. The dog crept forward, sniffing the air, its hunger making it bold. The situation was turning quickly. I couldn't risk a confrontation with the kittens exposed in my arms. Glancing around desperately, I spotted an old wooden gate nearby, slightly ajar, leading into an overgrown garden. Without hesitation, I darted to it, squeezing through the narrow opening just as the dog barked sharply behind me. Inside the garden, the world grew quiet again. The towering trees muffled the city sounds, and the heavy vines blocked the cold wind. I paused for a moment, catching my breath, gently rocking the fragile lives in my arms. The mother's body shivered weakly, but she was still breathing. The kittens wriggled closer to her chest, their mews softer now as they found the faint beat of their mother's heart. This was no longer a simple rescue. It was a fragile, precious life I was carrying, and every step forward now carried the weight of survival. The rain began to fall harder now, thick droplets striking the leaves above like tiny drums, as if nature itself was urging me to move faster. I couldn't stay hidden in the garden for long. The kittens were far too fragile, and the mother's breathing was growing fainter by the second. Time was slipping through my fingers. Holding them close, I hurried toward the narrow path leading to the street. My car was parked a few blocks away, but every step felt longer, heavier. The mother's head hung loosely against my arm now, her breath shallow and uneven. I could feel the tremor in her body, like distant thunder inside her fragile chest. Cars passed by on the main road, unaware of the quiet emergency unfolding in my arms. My soaked jacket clung to my skin, but I barely noticed the cold anymore. The world had shrunk down to just us, a fight for life contained within trembling fur and fading breath. Reaching the car, I gently placed the mother and her kittens inside a blanket I had kept on the passenger seat. The warmth of the vehicle's heater kicked in as I started the engine, filling the cabin with a soft hum, as if trying to calm the storm both outside and inside. Every red light felt like an eternity. I whispered softly to the mother, as though my words alone could keep her tethered to life. "Hold on, just a little longer. You're almost there." Her eyes fluttered half open at the sound of my voice, but they were glassy, unfocused. She was slipping further away. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, my chest tightening with fear that I may be too late. Finally, the clinic appeared, its soft neon glow cutting through the rain like a beacon. I pulled into the emergency entrance, where a vet technician spotted me rushing toward the door, cradling the bundle tightly. "Please," I gasped, my voice breaking. She can't breathe. The kittens too. Please, help them." Without hesitation, they whisked them from my arms, disappearing behind swinging doors. I stood frozen in the empty hallway, rainwater dripping from my clothes onto the pale linoleum floor, my heart pounding against my ribs. Now, all I could do was wait, and pray that I hadn't arrived too late. The waiting room was unbearably quiet, yet my mind was drowning in noise, a storm of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios crashing relentlessly against my thoughts. The ticking of the wall clock sounded like distant thunder, each second a painful reminder that I was powerless now. Behind the closed doors, I imagined the scene, bright surgical lights casting a glow over their tiny, fragile body. The vet and her team working swiftly, carefully, oxygen masks for fluids. Gentle hands fighting against nature's cruel clock. I pictured the mother lying still on the examination table, her breathing shallow but steady as trained hands monitored. Her vitals, the kittens, barely larger than my palm, were being carefully warmed, their tiny hearts racing, their lungs struggling to find rhythm. Suddenly, the doors swung open. The vet stepped out, her face serious, yet calm. I stood up immediately, my breath caught in my throat. "She's critical," the vet began softly. "Severely dehydrated, anemic, and dangerously weak. But she's holding on." The faintest flicker of relief passed through me, but my gaze remained locked on her, waiting for more. "The kittens are stable for now," she continued. "They're strong, that's a miracle in itself. But without their mother, they're vulnerable. We're giving them fluids, warmth, and nutrition. It's still a very delicate situation." I nodded, swallowing the tight knot in my throat. The vet's voice lowered with gentle seriousness. "Truthfully, if you hadn't brought them when you did, they likely wouldn't have made it through the night." Her words hit me like a wave, both a sting and a strange comfort. I had arrived just in time, but now, the real battle had only begun. Through a small window, I could see them in the recovery room, the mother cat resting on a soft, warm blanket, her breathing assisted by gentle machines. The kittens were nestled close to her side, their tiny paws twitching as they clung to the fragile promise of life. I pressed my hand lightly against the glass. "You've made it this far," I whispered. Keep fighting for them. Rain continued to fall softly outside, but inside that small room, a quiet, fragile hope had begun to grow. Night slowly bled into morning, yet time inside the clinic felt frozen. The dim hallway lights flickered softly, casting long shadows against the sterile white walls. Every breath I took felt heavy, as if I was carrying the mother cat's fragile fate on my own chest. Through the window, I watched the medical team move with quiet urgency. The vet adjusted 4 lines with precision, her eyes never leaving the monitors that displayed delicate, wavering lines, each one representing a heartbeat refusing to give up. The mother's breathing was still ragged, her chest rising and falling. With the aid of the small oxygen tube, her fur, now partially cleaned, revealed the bruises, wounds, and exhaustion etched into her body. Every inch of her told the story of how much she had sacrificed for her kittens. The kittens, too small to fully understand the battle surrounding them, clung together like a single trembling mass. Their tiny bellies moved rhythmically with every small breath. Some suckled weakly on the tiny feeding syringes the staff provided. Others slept, their fragile bodies wrapped in miniature heated blankets. The vet finally returned to me, her expression serious but gentle, like someone balancing hard truth with hope. "These first 12 hours are everything," she said softly. "Her organs are under immense strain. We're doing everything we can to stabilize her. The kittens, they're feeding, which is a very good sign." I nodded silently, my eyes unable to pull away from the fragile family. My emotions were twisted, hope, fear, guilt, all woven tightly together. "She's still responsive," the vet added. "Every time we adjust her position, she tries to move closer to the kittens. Even in this state, she's focused on them." Hearing that broke something inside me. This was not just survival, it was pure, selfless love. Even while standing at death's door, her final instinct was to protect her babies. I placed my hand against the glass once more, whispering as though she could hear me through the layers of walls and machines. "You're not alone anymore. Keep fighting for them and for yourself." The hours crawled forward. The rain outside had finally stopped, but inside, the battle was far from over. The sun had risen quietly, casting soft golden rays through the clinic windows. The storm had finally passed, but inside, the battle for life still hung in delicate balance. I sat in the corner of the waiting room, drained but alert, my eyes never leaving the small window that allowed me glimpses into the recovery room. Every beep from the monitors, every movement from the staff sent a ripple of anxiety through my chest. Then, something subtle happened. The vet leaned over the mother cat and gently removed the oxygen tube. My breath caught. Was this the end? Was she too weak to even breathe now? But then, she inhaled. Shaky at first, shallow, then another breath, stronger. Her chest rose and fell, slower but steady. The machine beeped steadily, reflecting each fragile breath she fought for. "She's breathing on her own," the vet said softly as she stepped into the hallway. Her voice carried the weight of cautious hope. I stood, unable to speak, simply nodding as my heart raced. "She's not out of danger," the vet continued, "but this is the first real sign that she wants to stay. Her body is responding to treatment, and the kittens, they're feeding stronger now, more eager." I finally allowed myself a small, trembling breath of relief. For the first time since I had found her in that cold alley, the darkness felt like it was beginning to lift out through the window. I watched as the mother cat shifted ever so slightly. Her head turned, eyes blinking weakly, scanning for her kittens. With a faint, almost whispered mew, she acknowledged them, and me, in some distant, unspoken way. Her paw twitched gently as one of the kittens crawled closer, nuzzling against her. It was as if, after all she had endured, she was reaching back toward life, not for herself, but for them. Tears welled in my eyes. This was the moment I had been praying for, the moment when hope quietly whispered, "Not yet." Just as hope had begun to flicker like a fragile candle, the atmosphere inside the clinic shifted again. Suddenly, sharply, the steady beeping from the monitors that had been my lifeline of reassurance now wavered, skipping a beat, then racing. Unnaturally, the vet rushed back into the room, her calm professionalism masking the growing concern. A nurse followed, adjusting the 4-drip as the vet leaned close to the mother cat, speaking softly but urgently. I pressed against the glass, my breath fogging up the window as panic wrapped around my chest. "What's happening?" I whispered, though no one could hear me. The vet's voice, though muffled behind the glass, carried a few chilling words I could make out. "Seizure, possible infection, blood pressure, unstable." The mother cat's frail body began to tremble, her muscles locking in small, jerking spasms. One kitten squeaked, disturbed by the sudden movement. The other kittens huddled closer, sensing the shift without understanding it. The vet's team moved quickly. They inserted a new syringe into the IV port, their hands steady but urgent. Fluids flowed faster now. Medications were added. The small heart monitor emitted sharp, irregular beeps that pierced the quiet room like warning bells. I stood frozen, helpless, forced to watch this terrifying battle unfold beyond my reach. My earlier relief was replaced by a crushing weight of fear. After coming so far, was this where it would all unravel? "She's developed an infection from her previous injuries," the vet later explained to me, stepping out briefly. Her immune system is dangerously weak. We've started antibiotics and stabilizers. The next few hours, they're absolutely critical. Her words were careful, measured, but I could hear the gravity behind them. I clenched my fists, swallowing back tears. I had promised that she would be safe. And now, as her body fought desperately to survive, I could only stand by, praying silently that her strength would once again carry her through. Inside the recovery room, the kittens remained, pressed against her side, oblivious to the fragile line she was walking between life and death. They needed her, and somehow, I knew she knew it too. The storm inside her body raged on, but she was still fighting. Hours slipped by like distant echoes, each minute heavier than the last. I sat quietly, staring at the clock, feeling each tick as if it were being carved into my chest. The uncertainty was unbearable. And then a shift. The frantic beeping of the monitor finally slowed, returning to a calm, rhythmic pulse. The mother cat's trembling had ceased. Her body now lay still, not in surrender, but in fragile stability. Bavette entered the waiting area with a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. This time, she was smiling faintly, but unmistakably. "She's stabilizing," she whispered, almost as if afraid that louder words might disturb the fragile peace inside. "The antibiotics are working. The fever has dropped. Her breathing is improving. She's fighting, and she's winning." A weight I didn't even realize I was still carrying suddenly lifted. My shoulders sagged with relief, my throat tight, with unspoken emotion. "Can I see her?" I asked, my voice cracking. The vet nodded. "Only for a moment. She needs rest, but I think she'll know you're there." Carefully, I stepped into the recovery room. The soft beeping of the machines created a gentle background rhythm. The room smelled of antiseptic and faint traces of warm milk, the mixture of struggle and healing. The mother cat lay peacefully on the padded blanket, her eyes half open, their dullness slowly being replaced with a faint glimmer of awareness. Her breathing was steady, each rise and fall of her chest like a quiet victory. The kittens slept soundly, curled against her warm body, as if sensing their mother's strength returning. I knelt beside her and whispered softly, "You did it. You're still here." For a brief moment, her eyes locked onto mine, and then the smallest, softest purr vibrated from her fragile body. Weak, but present. That sound, so small, yet so powerful, was the first true sign that hope had returned. In that room, surrounded by life clinging so fiercely to existence, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Light. The next morning, the clinic was bathed in soft golden light, replacing the cold sterility with a gentle warmth. The storm outside had long passed, but inside, something far more beautiful had begun to bloom. I returned to the recovery room, this time carrying a small blanket I had brought from home, soft, familiar, and comforting. The vet allowed me a little more time with them now that stability had returned. The mother cat stirred as I entered, lifting her head slightly with more strength than before. Her once dull eyes now held a quiet spark, a fragile but undeniable will to live. The kitten squirmed gently against her, tiny paws stretching in contentment. As I sat beside her, I extended my hand slowly, careful not to startle her. She blinked, watching me with a mixture of caution and curiosity. But then, to my surprise, she pressed her head gently into my palm, her whiskers twitching against my fingers. A soft, delicate purr vibrated beneath my hand. It was weak, but full of trust. This was the moment the first true bond no longer saw me as a stranger or simply a rescuer. In that quiet room, she recognized something deeper: safety, comfort, and perhaps even gratitude. The kittens, sensing their mother's calm, wriggled toward me as well. One tiny kitten mewed softly, its mouth opening in a faint cry, blind eyes still closed but moving toward my warmth. I carefully placed the soft blanket under them, tucking them in as the mother watched, her gaze following every gentle motion. "She's starting to trust you fully now," the vet whispered from the doorway. "That trust will help her heal even faster." I stayed there for a long while, my hand resting gently on her head, feeling the fragile rhythm of her breathing. The warmth of the kittens pressed against her belly. In that moment, there was no more fear, no more uncertainty, just life, delicate, precious, and fiercely determined to continue. Just as days of calm had lulled me into hope, the fragile balance shifted once again. Healing is never a straight path, and fate was not finished testing her yet. It started with something small, a faint wheeze in her breathing. At first I thought it was exhaustion, but the vet's watchful eyes caught it immediately. She leaned in, listening closely to the tiny, labored breaths that rattled with every exhale. "She may have fluid building up in her lungs," the vet murmured, concern returning to her face. "It could be a secondary infection, or her weakened heart struggling to keep up." My chest tightened. After everything she had already endured, another fight was beginning. Within hours, her breathing worsened. The rhythmic rise and fall of her chest became irregular. The kittens sensed the change too. One of them mewed sharply, as though crying out for their mother's strength to return. The vet and her team moved quickly, administering diuretics and carefully monitoring her oxygen levels. The room once filled with quiet hope was now thick with tension again. The monitor beeped in irregular patterns, every sound like a warning bell echoing in my mind. As I stood by helplessly, I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She was fighting, but her small body trembled under the weight of this new challenge. I whispered softly, barely holding my voice steady, "You've come this far. Please, don't give up now." For a brief moment, her gaze met mine. Even through her weakness, there was still a flicker of fight, as if she was telling me, "I'm still here." The vet gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "She's strong, but we're in a very delicate window again. The next 24 hours will be critical." The weight returned to my chest like a familiar, cruel companion. I sat through the night once more, silently willing her to hold on. Because now, more than ever, her life wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to the tiny kittens, nestled beside her, and to the bond we had built together. The storm had returned, but the fight wasn't over. The long night felt endless, the steady hum of machines, the quiet footsteps of the vet team, and the occasional soft mews from the kittens were the only sounds filling the tense air. I sat motionless, eyes fixed on her tiny chest, rising and falling. Each breath was still a struggle, but the flicker of life within her refused to burn out. Hours passed. The sun slowly crept over the horizon, casting soft golden light into the room, as if nature itself was offering comfort, gently whispering, "Hold on." And then, just as the first rays of morning touched her fragile frame, something remarkable happened. Her breathing, once shallow and uneven, began to steady. The rattling wheeze softened, the desperate gasps transformed into smoother, calmer breaths. The monitors stabilized. That familiar steady rhythm returned, stronger this time, as though her body had made a decision. "I will live." The vet entered, eyes wide with cautious hope. She moved quickly, adjusting the oxygen flow and checking her vitals. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "She's responding," she whispered. "Her lungs are clearing. The medication is working." I felt my throat tighten, my eyes blurring with tears that I no longer tried to hold back. The mother cat slowly opened her eyes, more alert than I had seen in days. She blinked, scanning the room, then gently lifted her head, higher, steadier. One by one, the kittens sensed their mother's presence returning. Crawling closer, nuzzling into her warmth, she lowered her head to groom them, weakly at first, but with a tenderness that radiated strength. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw not a dying animal but a mother reclaiming her role, determined to nurture the tiny lives she had fought so hard to bring into this world. The vet quietly whispered beside me, "She's not just surviving anymore, she's healing." In that room filled with quiet machines and tiny heartbeats, I witnessed a miracle, not loud or dramatic, but powerful in its simplicity. Life had chosen to fight back. The darkness that once loomed so heavily now lifted, replaced by something far stronger, hope. In the days that followed, a quiet rhythm returned to the clinic room, but it was different now. No longer filled with fear, it was filled with soft, healing sounds. The gentle purrs of contentment, the tiny mews of hungry kittens, and a steady hum of life rebuilding itself. Each day, I visited them, and with each visit, something beautiful happened. The mother cat, once so fragile and guarded, now welcomed my presence with a quiet grace. She no longer flinched when I approached. Instead, she lifted her head, her soft eyes meeting mine, recognizing me not as a stranger but as part of her story. Her purrs grew stronger. Her body, once weak and trembling, now carried a quiet strength as she nursed her kittens, grooming them gently, keeping them close beneath her protective paw. One morning, as I entered, one of the tiny kittens, still blind but instinctively curious, crawled toward me, its tiny body wiggling clumsily across the blanket. The mother cat watched, but instead of pulling the kitten back, she allowed it to explore. She trusted me. Carefully, I extended my hand, letting the kitten nuzzle into my fingers, feeling its tiny heartbeat flutter beneath its soft fur. The bond between us all was no longer just about survival. It was something deeper now. The vet, standing quietly behind me, whispered with a gentle smile, "They know your family now." I stayed for hours, watching the fragile family grow stronger. Every gentle nudge, every content purr, every tiny heartbeat was a reminder of how far they had come from near death to this tender, healing moment, and through it all, I felt it to a bond I hadn't expected, but one that had become unbreakable. I wasn't just their rescuer anymore. I was theirs, and they were mine. Weeks passed like gentle ripples across a calm pond. The harsh memories of that first desperate night had softened, replaced by daily moments of warmth and quiet joy. The clinic's sterile room, once filled with fear and uncertainty, had transformed into a cradle of life, a temporary home where love had quietly worked its healing magic. The mother cat, once at the very edge of life, now stood proudly on all four legs. Her fur had regained its shine, her eyes sparkled with life, and her body no longer trembled with weakness. The kittens, once blind and fragile, now scampered playfully across the blanket, their tiny paws chasing invisible threads of curiosity. Every morning, I arrived at the clinic and was greeted by their soft purrs and playful meows. They recognized my voice instantly, their tiny heads turning toward me, their tails flicking in excitement. But now, a new chapter was calling. The vet gently approached me one afternoon, clipboard in hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of happiness and gentle finality. "They're ready," she said softly. "Healthy, strong, and old enough to leave the clinic. It's time for them to go home." Home. That simple word carried so much weight. I knelt beside them one last time, inside the clinic, gently scooping up each kitten, feeling their warmth and tiny heartbeats against my chest. The mother watched me carefully, but not with fear or worry. Instead, her eyes held something beautiful: trust. I whispered to her, my voice trembling with emotion. "You've done so well. You fought for them, for yourself. And now, we start again together." Carefully, I lifted them into their carrier, placing the soft blanket inside, the same one they had laid on throughout their long fight. The mother cat followed, stepping inside with grace, curling protectively around her babies one last time before the door gently closed. As I carried them out of the clinic into the bright afternoon sun, a sense of peace settled over me. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a new life, a life they had all earned through their quiet, fierce, and unbreakable will to survive. Together, we were going home. The drive home felt surreal, a journey that had started with pain, now ending with hope. As I glanced at the carrier beside me, I could hear the soft purrs of the mother cat and the tiny playful chirps of her kittens. They were calm, safe, and finally, free. The house, once quiet and empty, was now ready for its new family. I had carefully prepared every corner: cozy beds, warm blankets, soft toys, scattered across the living room. The windows let in the afternoon sun, casting golden rays across the floor, as if welcoming them home. When I gently opened the carrier, the kittens tumbled out first, curious, wide-eyed, their tiny paws tapping across the wooden floor. They sniffed the air, exploring their new world with innocent wonder. The mother stepped out last, her movements graceful but cautious. She scanned the room, her eyes following the playful leaps of her kittens. Slowly, she relaxed, realizing this was not just a shelter. This was home. That as I sat quietly on the floor, one by one, the kittens climbed into my lap, their tiny bodies warm and trusting. The mother watched for a moment, then softly approached, settling herself beside me, her purr resonating deeply. She pressed her head into my hand, a gesture of trust that carried the weight of everything we had been through together. The house, once silent, now pulsed with life, little paws scampering across the floor, tiny meows filling the air, and the steady hum of peaceful purrs surrounding me. Every so often, I glanced at the mother cat, her once fearful eyes now filled with peace and quiet contentment. She had fought through the darkest nights, held on through the fiercest battles, and now, she was home, with her kittens, with me. As the sun set and the house settled into gentle silence, I whispered softly, "You're safe now. This is forever." And in that quiet, I felt something far deeper than words, a bond not built by blood, but by trust, survival, and love that had defeated the darkest odds. We were no longer strangers, we were family. As we close this incredible journey, I want to thank you for staying with me through every heartbeat, every tear, and every moment of hope. This story is a powerful reminder. No matter how dark life gets, even the smallest souls can fight their way back to the light with a little love, patience, and kindness. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with others who believe in second chances. And remember, every life matters, every rescue counts. Until the next story, stay kind, stay compassionate, and never underestimate the strength of a tiny heartbeat.